Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Chicanery. This is feels like I say this every single episode, but we got kind of a big one. We've got F1, we've got both Mexico and Brazil. We've got IndyCAR silly season stuff, Formula E. This is just one big open wheel bonanza. As per usual, it is my wonderful, wonderful co-host JT.
Hello.
And let's get to it. So, we are starting with F1, and I guess let's start chronologically. So, we've got Mexico. And as per usual, the typical question, good race or not?
I mean, for me personally, I don't even think I paid that much attention to the Mexico City GP, but I mean, to me, I felt like it was fine. It wasn't terrible. I thought it was okay. I mean, there were a few like clumsy things that happened during the race, or at least during qualifying, I think. Like there was a lot of like issues with like pit lane. I don't know if that was like during like the sprint race or like just like the qualifying in general for the regular race, but there were like a lot of like people getting stopped up at pit lane and for whatever reason like that was a big issue and I don't know if it was this GP or if it was the following one in Brazil. People got penalized for it. I don't know. It was very weird, but like that was really the main like weird thing that stood out to me in the race, or at least the whole race weekend. I don't know about you.
Yeah, there's been, congestion with, particularly practice sessions and qualifying sessions getting out of the pits at both Sao Paulo and in Mexico City is always kind of an issue. And stewards are looking at a way to try to mitigate that. It's I mean, there, like I said, lots of things. Number of drivers were under investigation both weeks to try to sort that out. And I know there were. I want to say there were a couple of penalties in Mexico. I know there were some investigations, but ultimately no further action was taken at Sao Paulo. But it's worth noting between, especially with the weather, Sao Paulo was just kind of all over the place. But yeah, no, it was yeah, qualifying and practice in Mexico was just wild, and it led to a Ferrari front row blockout, ostensibly.
This wasn't I feel like Ashton Martin was also in the front too somehow. That might have been Brazil that I'm getting it mixed up with, but I feel like they somehow ended up at the front.
Yeah, they did okay, and we'll get to the proper race report here in just a second. They did okay at Mexico City, but they seem to have really rediscovered their form at Sao Paulo. But an interesting talking point here was just saying that maybe to mitigate just absolute chaos that has been quali here lately, maybe adopting the general style of rules that IndyCar has.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people saying like, oh, should F1 adopt the same qualifying rules that IndyCar has, specifically being the rule that they have, I'm pretty sure, where if you cause a red flag or something during a qualifying session, you get penalized for that or something. Um, I mean, I feel like in a perfect world, it could work, but because it's not a perfect world and it's F1, I don't really see that working out too well. I mean, I feel like there would be something, like just something that would happen that would make it where it doesn't actually work out the way people would intend it to work out. So I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it'd be better just to leave it alone.
Yeah, we should talk about this all the time. I don't really know what the right answer is. I don't at all. But some change in qualifying procedure, again, particularly when you're talking about, circuits with narrow pit lanes and, particularly, kind of narrow pit exits, just something to mitigate the chaoticness of these sessions would probably be good. By all means, drop us a line if you've got the answer or think you do. But it just it always feels like there are too many pieces. And then once you start getting, race control and start moving up the ladder of authority at the FIA, it always gets increasingly convoluted.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Again, in a perfect world, I feel like it would all work out and it would be okay, but truthfully, I don't think it would. I guess the actual race, I remember seeing stuff where somebody had said that Charles said he wasn't gonna work together with Carlos, and I'm like, okay, maybe I don't actually remember what happened. I think it turned out okay for Ferrari, even though I'm like, maybe that isn't the best strategy to go about saying just right off the bat, yeah, I'm not working with my teammate. And it's like, I mean, I get your teammate is kind of like your biggest rival in F1, but I mean, to some degree, it might have had some benefit for them. They did choose to work together.
Yeah, it's one of those tough things. I'd be curious to know exactly what Charles meant by that. Granted, Red Bull have already locked up the drivers and constructors championship, so you can argue that maybe there's no real incentive at this point to, play the team game when, well, Red Bull won that game, frankly. But also, and again, we'll get onto this a little bit later, but you know, Charles has just had a horrible string of luck, particularly these last couple of years. So maybe this is him attempting to take matters kind of into his own hands.
I
I don't
mean,
know.
it's like I don't know. It was is like the bad luck that Charles has had, is that like attributed to like is that like a Ferrari issue? Like it's a team issue, that's the reason why things are the way they are, or is that like a Charles issue? Like it's a skill issue on behalf of him, or like I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of all of those. Fred Vasseur has certainly brought a level of calm that team has not seen in a little while, but he is still ostensibly undoing all of the work or damage, I guess, depending on how you want to look at that Bonato did during his handful of years as team principal. So there's still a lot going on at that team. And then I don't think Charles helps himself all the time. I think there are issues, there are times when he's overdriving the car. Perfect example of that was that vicious spin into the barriers he had at Miami, where he got up on the curb. He was clearly pushing. It was, a qualifying lap. But, talking about a car that by all accounts is a bit snappy, a bit twitchy once you start to get towards the limits of grip anyway, and then, riding up on the curb, and he was asking entirely too much of the car and speared off into the barriers. So I think it is a combination of all of those factors, honestly.
I mean, I can't argue with that. So I guess getting to the race, the first thing that happened literally was kind of a Qatar GP repeat where there was some clumsiness going into turn one, of course, which caused Checo to be out of the race on lap one, unfortunately for him.
Yeah, it's such a shame. Was really hoping that, his home Grand Prix would be the race where he starts to kind of put it all together and maybe sort of rediscover his form that we saw in the first third of the season. But it just wasn't it. Having watched a number of onboards, and Heinz Harald Frentzen was terminally online for like that whole weekend, retweeting various, the helicopter shots, a couple of different onboards, and talking about it. And you watch, that tries to make it three wide, runs into Leclerc and somebody else. Max might have been in that somewhere. I don't remember, but yeah, it just basically makes it three wide and then just kind of turns in. I don't know if he was expecting, somebody to back out there, expecting it was because it was Leclerc that was in the middle of that. If he
I
was
mean, it was
expecting.
very similar to what Lewis did in the Qatar GP going into turn one, like going three wide. And I guess, I don't know, again, maybe expecting somebody to bow out and nobody did. And the crash happened.
Yeah, exactly. You see the start, and then you see the turn in, you see the tire smoke from the wheel to wheel contact, and then you just watch Sergio just spin off into the barriers, the Tech Pro barriers at that spot, and it almost looks like something out of a cartoon, if I'm being perfectly honest. It is
I mean,
wild to see the
F1
fun.
in general is just cartoonish.
Yeah, I
I
mean, well,
like
yes, that is true. But
it was, I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, it was a bit of clumsy driving. I understand. Especially wanting to show up folks, at his home race. I get it. And also the pressure that I'm sure Sergio is under within that team. But yeah, it was clumsy. It cost Leclerc big, and that's how Max goes from, P3 to, basically P1 by, turn 2, turn 3.
I mean, it's funny too because that was like at the same time, like the week between like the Mexico race, or it might have been the week between like the Qatar GP and the Mexico GP, where it's like the F1 rumor mill was just going crazy. Like it was, I mean, it initially started with like some other dude like tweeting something about he tweeted it in Spanish, but obviously you can translate it. And it was like, "Oh, you're not gonna believe the rumors I heard in the paddock." And it was really funny because that kind of set off everything. Because then everybody started tweeting things about, "Oh yeah, there's this rumor, this is a rumor, everything." And then literally like 2, 3 days later, he like was all like, "Oh, I'm sorry for putting out that rumor. Like it's not true." Or I'm sorry for saying something. I'm like, yeah, that's probably because you got a cease and desist. That's why you probably stopped saying stuff because somebody sent you a cease and desist and that hit your desk that day and you had to send out that tweet and apologize.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, all of this, Bria and I talked a little bit about it last episode, but a lot of these rumors, they really it boils down to, trust me, bro. I know a guy is really what a
Source,
lot.
just trust me.
Yeah, exactly. That's what that's what a lot of those were. And especially the big thing, about how, and Daniel Ricciardo is gonna get, that seat, and, the stipulation of, finishing order in the championship. It's like, I mean, granted, and much like I said then, it would not be beyond Red Bull to do something like that. Part of why it's so easy to spin those rumors is because they've done stuff like this before, you know. But we currently, today, there is every indication that Checo will, at least keep the seat until his contract runs out in 2024, in the 2024 season. And then, we'll revisit that, provided he doesn't sign an extension, or, if there's potentially an additional 1 year option on the contract, which there could well be. I don't remember quite what the terms were when he signed it a couple years ago. But point being is, right now, as we know it today, Checo is keeping that seat for another year.
I mean, yeah, because I'm like, okay, I wouldn't put it past Red Bull to just like randomly just oust somebody to sack them like mid-season because again, they kind of did that with Nick DeFries. So I'm like, okay, if it happened to him, maybe it could happen to anybody. It's possible. Then like my other speculation was if any of it was true, was that the Audi F1 deal fell through or something because there's a lot of speculation, heavy speculation that that did not go as planned and that they are actually not going to F1. It's not official yet, but I wouldn't put it past if it turns out that this is indeed not happening.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff. We'll see what happens. Certainly, it would be a whole lot of effort and expense for them to back out. But and I've talked about it a bit, on Twitter, and actually for anybody who was listening and who was in the space last week, I talked about this a little bit. But the Volkswagen Group board, who make most of the decisions across all of the various, I think it's like 8 divisions or something at this point within the Volkswagen Group, and and this includes motorsports, very, very flaky. While they are certainly, they will commit to motorsports projects, but if for whatever reason, if the future looks tenuous, then they are all too happy to say, forget it, and move on. The Volkswagen Group board generally doesn't fall foul of sort of sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah, I guess going back to the race, the next big thing that happened was there was K-Mag. He had an unfortunate huge shunt, and I think there was some discourse around this just because of how long it took the safety officials to like get to him. And I'm like, yeah, they kind of did take a while to get to him, and it was a pretty big hit. So it's like I don't think you'd want like safety officials taking their time to get to somebody with having such a like hard crash.
Yeah, absolutely. was, working. I missed the race live, but I watched a rebroadcast of it, and yeah, lap 33, turn 8 was where, yeah, he, it was rear left suspension failure. Haas never did clarify what the failure was, if it was the it was a hub failure, maybe one of the because yeah, it's a double wishbone design in each corner. Maybe one of the A arms failed. And there never was any real clarification of what happened there. The point being, yeah, it was a massive accident. And yeah, and I'm just standing there and I'm watching, he gets himself out of the car and he just kind of saunters away from it. I'm like, okay, where's the safety crew? He's, trying to, figure out where to get through the barriers to get off the circuit. Still no safety crew. And it's like, still waiting, still no safety crew. It's like, okay, where are you guys? It's like, and I don't know quite where on the Mexico City circuit, I don't know quite where the safety team kind of tucks itself, but clearly wherever it is, that is not the right place to be because it took them entirely too long
The
to
safety
get
crew
to
said
that.
it was their day off.
Yeah, clearly. But something I do want to bring up is that on coming out of the final corner on lap 32, K-Mag was all four off the circuit. If you watch the onboard, I can't remember who he was trying to get around. I think it might have been Bottas, but he was all four wheels off the circuit, and I know the curbs are kind of aggressive over there. That outside curb. It is unlikely, but could that have perhaps contributed to the what feels like just a freak suspension failure on the car by chance? Just food for thought, I guess. Because I sure as heck don't know what the answer to that question is or not. But it was something I noticed when I was watching the race, and then as when I went back, I was rewatching it as I was taking notes. Yeah.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. Um, I know McLaren was looking pretty good at Mexico, and they also look pretty good at Brazil. So I think whatever updates they did to their car, it's working for them.
Yeah, absolutely. The McLaren is at this point is legitimately the second quickest car on the grid, I think. If it wasn't for in Mexico, Yuki and Oscar having a bit of a coming together at lap 49, I think, then I feel like McLaren potentially would have finished a little higher up the order because I do believe Oscar picked up a little bit of damage as a result of that. But no, and then and actually likewise Oscar's bad luck getting absolutely obliterated by the just explosion of Haas and Williams at the start of that race, where there was just debris flying everywhere and it damaged the car quite significantly. It's just, Oscar, unfortunately, I mean, Oscar is him. It's a fabulous rookie campaign. But it's just 2 weeks in a row of just bad luck. And it's just rough.
Yeah, I don't think I would put like too much I guess pressure per se. I mean, I he's still a rookie, so I'm like, okay, it's probably okay to like make a few errors. I mean, he's not terrible, so it's like, yeah, it's just bad luck. It's not really anything more, anything less. Obviously the race ended. Max won. Yay, shocker. Nobody saw that coming.
Yeah.
And there was like apparently a fight between some fans in the grandstands, and I think it was between like a Red Bull fan and like a Ferrari fan or something. All I know is like one of the fans got a lifetime race ban for the fight, so I'm like, probably wasn't worth doing all that.
No, and it's funny seeing that because, and, and especially as this, reverberates, given that I straddle kind of multiple series, as a part of this and then, the main NASCAR pod. And, it's like, I can't even remember the last time that there was a fight in the grandstands at a NASCAR event, like legitimately.
I
It's
mean,
like
maybe you probably have some people at Talladega of all tracks in the infield because everybody knows how wild and rowdy that gets. Maybe some people who are so drunk they don't even know what time it is or what day it is, maybe getting into some fights. But in the grandstands, no, haven't
Yeah,
seen it.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I was like, yeah, probably some infield shenanigans, but like you said, throwing hands in the grandstands. And it's like, and I'm sorry, it's like you guys spend like, this has been talked about, ad nauseum, particularly this year. Like tickets to Formula One races are too expensive to be acting like this. It's like grow up. It sucks to watch, to see Sergio have such a bad day. I mean, that sucks. I like Sergio, and I genuinely felt bad. It's like, but what are you doing fighting, fighting somebody over it? It's just clown shit, honestly.
Kind of uh, a bit of tomfoolery from F1 fans that always love to have moral high ground over other racing fans and be like, "Oh yeah, we're the classiest form of motorsports fans because we don't even like booing." It's like, okay, whatever
Yeah,
you
well,
say.
as I was about to say, yeah, you weren't the classy ones this weekend. Not even close. But and speaking of some of the other post race stuff, well, first of all, Lewis finished P2 and notched fastest lap on the final lap, which good stuff. Mercedes is still, and it's wild to say this as the season draws to a close. They still don't really understand what and does not make the W14 fast, because both Lewis and George complained about the car after the sprint race at
Yeah, I
Mexico
get it.
City.
I too sometimes don't really know what I'm doing, and Mercedes is in their flop era, I guess.
Yeah, so it's like they grumbled about the car to no end, and then the car was pretty quick come Sunday. I mean, the biggest difference was that track temp was a bit higher on the Sunday, which, although given, you've got hot air coming from the tires and the track, then you're going to have kind of low pressure turbulent air, so which in theory would destabilize the car a little bit. But also the Mercedes is a tractor to begin with, so maybe that helps. I don't know. Like I said, nobody seems to understand what makes the W14 tick. And like I said, that's ridiculous to say with only a couple races left before we close out the season. But I mean, whatever.
It's a mystery.
Yeah, but also, while Logan retired out of the Mexico Grand Prix as a fuel pump failure, he actually had good pace right up and through that basically that final pit stop where they retired the car. He was kind of quick, and it's like, oh hey, maybe he is good.
Maybe he's just a late bloomer or something. Like, maybe I mean, not everybody's rookie seasons are going to be the same. So it's like some of them, it's like, yeah, you put them in and they'll just right off the bat perform pretty well. Um, some of them not so much. So maybe that's like the case for him. It takes him damn near to the end of the season to perform well, but whatever.
Yep. But no, I genuinely, like I said, I was bummed that he had the fuel pump failure because at the time that he was retired, I think he was P11, so he was within a whisker of a point. And like I said, it's encouraging for next year that he'll find his feet. Williams again has given every indication that they will keep him next year. So now, unfortunately, I think that could put him into kind of a do or die situation. But like I said, this is encouraging. But what wasn't encouraging at Mexico was the absolute lack of pace that the Aston Martins had. Now, they will both end up retiring anyway. Alonso on lap 47 after running over some debris somewhere. I really don't know what that was from. Given that the Yuki Oscar thing didn't happen until 2 laps later. I don't know. Um, and then Stroll would retire on lap 67 after what seemed like pretty light contact with Bottas. I don't really understand what went on there, but it's like, guys, what are you doing?
It's Aston Martin. Aston Martin and Mercedes are absolutely in their flop era, which is kind of shocking from Aston Martin, considering the fact that throughout most of this year, they were doing pretty well. Like they had some pace. It's like I don't know what happened. It just seemed to like just fall off randomly.
Yeah, from what I understand, so there are a couple of things. If you believe what Aston Martin tells you, then when Pirelli made some mild tweaks to the tire after Silverstone, or actually for Silverstone, because it was debuted that weekend, that was what killed them. However, it is worth noting that no other team had that gigantic fall off in pace, and everybody from Pirelli to the other teams to even the various outlets were like, that's absolute nonsense. And what it is actually theorized is that it was the changes that they made to the floor and the barge board that debuted for the Silverstone weekend was actually what killed them. They went down the wrong development path, and it didn't work with the updated, particularly I want to say it was particularly the updated front wing that they were running at that time, and that was what killed them. Because yes, at the start of the season, they were the third fastest car.
Whatever they did, they need to undo it. Like, go back, backspace, redo it because it is not working.
Yeah, it's like that meme
They
where
regressed backwards. They literally went backwards. And it's like,
yeah,
how is this possible?
yeah, they went from being the third fastest car in the field behind for the Ferrari and the Red Bull to
Correctly
where
retiring off of just like a slight just tap with another car.
yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
what?
Yeah, no, but it reminds me of that meme where it's like upgrade, upgrade. It's like go back, go back. That's what that is. That was exactly what Aston Martin has been doing, and that's what they were doing. Because at Mexico, so at Coda, Mexico, and Sao Paulo, what they were doing is they were mixing and matching floor, front wing, rear wing from older specs of the car so they could try to figure out what worked, what didn't, and basically figure out where they went wrong. Because ironically, the car that ran at Sao Paulo that, Alonso finished P3 in was an old spec of the car, ostensibly.
I mean, again, it's just I still think it's just bonkers that they just went backwards. Like you would expect a race team to progressively get better as the season goes on, not start off good and then regress backwards. It's very puzzling to me. I guess we should move on to the Brazilian Grand Prix. Good race or no? Honestly, I thought that the main race was good. The sprint race, I don't really know. I personally, I just don't even like sprint races in general in F1. So usually they always get a bad rating from me just because I'm like, I don't get what the point of this is. Like, do we really need a sprint race?
Yeah, so the idea was to take kind of the template that F2 has been using for the last handful of years and basically just transpose it up to F1. So you've got the sprint and race, it's a quick shootout. There's some championship points implications, and then you basically use that to reseat the grid for the Sunday feature. But the issue is that, where F2, where they more or less play ball and will run, the F1 teams will basically run at 65, 70% to A, avoid damage and, unnecessary wear on components. And B, there is some reason, frankly, to sandbag a little bit because you ostensibly start a little higher up if you do. So it's just a case of, the FIA comes out with a system, it may work, it may not. But then the teams get wise to how to game said system, and then it's an eternal game of cat and mouse. So, because in fact, I think the FIA actually announced today some changes to the sprint formats for 2024. I didn't get the chance to look at that before we started recording, but I will sit down and compile that information, and we'll have that for you next time.
I mean, even like some of the tracks that they choose to do sprint races on, like Spa. Like, are you serious? Spa is just not the track I would choose to do a sprint race on, truthfully.
Oh
For
yeah, no, not at
F1
all.
or F2. I feel like Spa is just not it.
No, I completely agree. I don't think Spa is a good place to do it. I figure if you're gonna have one, these older, more raceable, quote unquote, style circuits like here, like Sao Paulo, I think if you're gonna do it, that's probably the place where you want to because it generally generates good racing anyway. But no, there needs to be a wholesale rethink of the sprint format, certainly for F1 weekends, because this is we just ended year 2, and it still doesn't work. It's just not good. But
No, it's not.
moving on to the main race, it was spicy from the very beginning. Charles crashes out on the formation lap because
He
of
was
a
channeling his inner LMP3, crashing out on the formation lap. That is quite literally only something I've seen LMP3 drivers do.
Oh my god. Yes, I agree. And yeah, hydraulics failure. And his message over the radio was heartbreaking though, when he was like, "Why am I so unlucky?" And it was like, "Oh my God, Charles, I'm sorry." I do. I feel so bad because that was a case of, that was not Charles contributing to his lack of luck. That was, I mean, that was
A
a,
Ferrari issue.
yeah, that's a mechanical failure. But, after we got his car cleaned up and then got ready for the start, turn one, lap one, Albon versus K Mag, both of them lose. And this makes K Mag's actually, this is second consecutive DNF in spectacular fashion, given his gargantuan accident the week previous, but also puts Albon out. And given that Williams and AlphaTauri are fighting for P7 for the constructors, these are valuable points those are the valuable points that Albon potentially gave up in the crash.
I feel like K Mag is just. I feel like he's very unlucky. I feel like he's kind of like Charles. I mean, it might be just because he's at Haas, and Haas is really not all that great from the beginning, but I feel like he's just very unlucky. I'm like, bro, maybe you should like go back to racing like sports cars or something, because at least there was like a bit more luck there, and it just wasn't as like I don't know. It seemed to go a lot better than F1.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of that is just the Haas is just slow and awful. And it means that unfortunately, because he just doesn't have the car performance, it puts him in some kind of sticky situations that he just can't drive his way through. Unfortunately, but yeah, it just stinks. Because yeah, he lots of DNFs and picking up damage due to other issues and so on and so forth. And speaking of the continuing lack of luck, you had the Alfa Romeo double DNF this past weekend. Zhou Guanyu retires on lap 22. Bottas about 15 laps later, 17 laps later.
That was
On
so
lap,
confusing for me because I was like, I was watching it and then I feel like I blinked and then it says both Alfa Romeos are like out. And I'm like, how did this happen? And they didn't even seem to like show it on the
yeah,
broadcast. Just all of a sudden, like, oh, DNF. I'm like, what?
yep. It was a tech. So Alfa Romeo quoted a technical issue. We don't have a video component, but JT just watched me do very large air quotes there. Um, that was what it was. So don't know, because it's worth knowing that the Alpha, or like the Alfa Romeo Sauber, is built on a lot of the bones that what Ferrari uses. So it is unknown if it was a similar hydraulic failure. It was hot the Sao Paulo weekend. It could have been high oil temps. We don't know. Alfa Romeo never bothered to specify what exactly took both cars out. But other than that, it was, like I said, an unspecified technical issue, which is very not helpful when you're trying to figure out why the cars break. But whatever.
I think there was also something else that happened during the sprint race. I think it was Alonso and Ocon had some type of contact, and I think it was Ocon that he went off and hit the barriers, and Alonso had some sort of damage.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, and it was so funny because not too long before that, Ocon was being specifically told over the radio to not race Alonso. And basically Alonso or Ocon told his race engineer to shut up and that he'll sort it out later. And then, about 3 corners later, just clatters into Alonso. And
It's
then
like,
you get,
okay, Colton Herta 2.0.
yeah, exactly. And then you get this it's glorious. Look it up. Alonso sprint your Brazil 2023 radio, and it is just this expletive laden radio message about basically what is wrong with Ocon. Why did he do that? He
Who was that guy that had that one like infamous F1 quote where he's like, "These guys are impossible to race with."
Oh my goodness. Might have been that might have been Albon, actually. I feel like that was
I feel like it was
Albon.
somebody that had. I feel like I don't think it was Albon because I feel like they had a Spanish accent.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember. I guess it could have been Sergio, because I remember Albon made a radio message like that not too long after he joined the Williams about, when they're racing me so hard. I remember that. I don't know, but I mean, truth be told, neither quotes are on the face of it exactly wrong. Like I said, there was no reason, especially after your race engineer tells you to back it down. and then you tell him to basically to shut the fuck up and let me drive, and then 3 corners later, you lose it and wipe out somebody else. And it's just
Because
like,
I literally at first I didn't know. I saw it happen. I'm like, okay, whose fault was that? Like I initially thought it was Alonso's fault because it seemed like he was going kind of slow. So I'm like, okay, maybe it was like something where he had something wrong with his car and was still like continuing to like be on the racing line or whatever, and that's why the collision happened. But I didn't know that Ocon's engineers were telling him not to race Alonso. It's like now I'm like, okay, now I know whose fault it actually is.
mhm, yeah. Yeah, to be fair, because it was kind of the first part of the lap. It's kind of that dogleg section of Sao Paulo. Alonso, and he had been doing it all weekend, taking in race scenarios, I should point out, taking a slightly wider line. He was basically late apexing that corner. And so while, yes, it makes you a little bit slower on the entry, the benefit is, certainly if you don't get wiped out by somebody else putting the car where there's just not room, you're very quick sort of mid corner and on exit. That was part of how Alonso was able to keep Checo behind for so long, was just running that different line. And yeah, I don't know. Ocon seems like he's a decent dude, but he does some really dumb stuff sometimes. Because all you have to do is watch and see a different line, and there's not space to send it and go 2 cars wide. Well, actually, that's not true. There is, but everybody has to absolutely be on their best behavior. And frankly, Ocon just has not displayed that he has the level of car control required to do that.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I guess the main thing with the Brazilian Grand Prix, Mercedes. Oh my God.
Oh, sweet
I cannot
Christ.
stop laughing because their performance was so bad. It was abysmal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? It's like, I guess the little like save Lewis spaces that the Brazilian fans usually do just wasn't working this time or something. I don't know. But it was just so bad. I'm like, what? Like, even Mexico wasn't that bad. Hell, even the rest of the races that they did earlier in the season was not as bad as Brazil was. I'm like, what? And I initially thought they retired George because he was too slow or something.
Yeah, it was just so bad. It's like, can you imagine that it was, the Brazil weekend last year? That was the last time that they won a race. Because that is almost inconceivable when you could think about just how bad their weekend was this year. They were slow in qualifying. They were slow in the sprint. Apparently they had floated around the idea of, changing the setup and doing a pit lane start, but then they opted against it for reasons. And then they were dog slow in the race. Russell retired with high power unit oil temperatures, with Mercedes going so far as to say that failure was imminent if they had left him on track basically any longer. And Lewis just couldn't make any progress, on the restart. Well, after the turn one melee, because he think he qualified, he ended up P5, and then he got up to third because he snuck. Like I said, he had snuck a couple positions, but then he gave up the spot to Alonso almost immediately when he was trying to make a move on Lando, which didn't stick. It'll open the door for Alonso, and then he just bled positions basically down every straight. It was just so bad, and like I said, and it boggles my mind that, like, you guys thought about doing a pit lane start. The option was there. You guys floated it, and then you didn't do anything. You just basically went, it'll be fine, and you left it, and then it was very not fine.
In typical Mercedes fashion, though.
Yes, and that is the problem. And once again, I'm sorry to keep, referencing this, but, I talked about this on, during basically the F1 segment of the Twitter space last week. But, it was fine. Mercedes has sucked at strategy for basically ever. It's just that they had a clear car performance advantage that could mask that deficiency. But now that they actually have to think, these idiots couldn't strategize their way out of a brown paper bag with both ends cut out. They just couldn't. It's like they are so bad. It's like they will have good options presented to them that any person with half an IQ would go, yes, we should do that. And they just go, nah, it'll be fine. And then they ship it for the Sunday race. And then it's just a mess. And I should point out, Lewis finished, I think, what, P8, P9? All things considered, is that utterly atrocious? No. But given the, mesospheric standards of basically the last decade, it's a far cry from certainly what we're used to for Mercedes. But like I said, it was just so bad, and I
They
know,
literally did the Eric Andre meme where he's like shooting that one guy, and then it's like they have a solution, a perfectly good solution that could possibly work. They don't do it, and they're like, "How could this happen?"
yeah, exactly. It's so dumb. The fact, and this is not the first time that this has happened. It's so stupid. And it's like, I would much rather you take the risk and either not pick up anything at all, or maybe if you do lose a couple of spots, as opposed to knowing that you have a problem and then just actively choosing to not do anything about it.
I
It's
mean, it's
like
either
this.
this type of dumb shit that happens, or it's them fumbling a strategy of some sort.
Oh yeah, like leaving Lewis out entirely too late on those tires at Coda. Yeah. And that's the thing. But like I said, it's been death by a thousand paper cuts, like I said, with Mercedes. It's been like that for years. But when you've got the class of the field with in terms of car performance, it doesn't matter. And that's why, and I know a lot of people are pinning their hopes on the W15 Mercedes. And I'm like, okay, fine. Even if they get on Red Bull's levels performance wise, they're going to completely throw it away on strategy. It's like, so, okay, yeah, you think that the W15 is going to be your shot at a championship. No, it's not. And I understand, you just to some extent, you make the best with what you're given. But this is just, like I said, the last 2 years have proved that, this team was really one change of regs away from basically falling into the channel. And that's exactly what's happened.
Unfortunately, at least the ending of the race was pretty good. Alonso versus Perez. It was a
Oh,
pretty close finish.
oh my goodness, yes. It it's funny. It's like you have 70 laps and then an F1 race breaks out. Funny how that works. But yeah, they great racing. Genuinely some of the best wheel to wheel stuff that we've seen all season. It was very much, Checo was on the hunt. He was in clean air. He got up to the back of Alonso. Alonso made him work for it. And even though the Red Bull has a very obvious car performance advantage, basically Alonso said, "Allow me to introduce myself." And he goes around the outside. I think that was turn 7. He goes around the outside and just he sticks it there and he puts a gap on Sergio. Wild stuff. And it was 53 thousandths of a second was the margin between Alonso and Perez. That is insane. Because even when you watch the camera shot of them coming across the line, you think Checo gets it until you go back to basically the photo finish, the camera that they use on the line. And it is the smallest of gaps. It was good stuff. I hope the FIA sees this and sees how positively everybody reacted to that. And maybe as we go forward, as they tweak the aero rigs, as they tweak the cars a little bit, to try to get more good close racing, because this is fantastic.
I mean, to me, it was cinema. It was great. Chef's kiss. One of the most interesting things that have happened throughout the whole F1 season.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems to have pulled Aston Martin out of their flop era. Alonso finished P3, Stroll finished P5. The P3 matching their best finish since Zandvoort, which was like 3 months ago.
Yeah,
So,
so hopefully that gives them some sort of encouragement to maybe fix or reverse, rather, whatever they did.
yep. And this will tell them that this is sort of the design and aero philosophy that they need to utilize going forward. This is great stuff. Yeah, no, like I said, we need more of this. This is fantastic. Um, but what one thing? Well, it's like a train wreck. I say we need more of it, but really we don't. We really need less of IndyCar silly season, but it's just so ridiculous. I can't not pay attention. So the last time we, updated, Roman Grosjean had commenced legal arbitration against Andretti Autosport. There was some chatter that Callum might be departing from Juncos Hollinger Racing. There was a question mark over who was going to be in the number 20 uh, Ed Carpenter racing car, and we didn't know if Yuri Vips was going to hold on to his seat in the number 30 Rahal Letterman Lanigan, I think that's the correct order, car. Well, we have answers to all of those questions. And the
Yeah.
first one I want to get into is definitely the Juncos one because, well, I had originally typed this in my notes when the announcement came out. Callum and Juncos agreed to part ways. That's not super surprising. Frankly, Juncos has treated Callum like absolute garbage, so I'm not surprised that he got sick of it and left. But Grosjean filling that seat, holy shit, what a bad idea! Like what the
Disaster
fuck?
imminent.
Yes. I cannot imagine two more fiery and frankly kind of hot-headed drivers in the same team. And oh my gosh, I can see it now. And this is not a matter of if. This is a matter of
No
when.
matter
They're going to come together and then you're going to watch IndyCar social media is just going to completely melt down. Like you're gonna have French media, you're gonna have Argentinian media, and they're gonna be trading barbs, and it's just gonna be oh my god, it's gonna be so bad.
you have
Like
Argentinian media, and you'll have the fans. The fans themselves are bad enough. Like, and then Yunkos doesn't do anything to like rein them in or tell them to, pump the brakes. So they just are just off the rails. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. They're off the rails. It's like, you know what? Y'all thought Callum was bad, which he wasn't.
well, he wasn't,
People were
yeah.
just overreacting. I mean, half the things that happened on track weren't really even that serious. It definitely wasn't worth sending death threats to him over. But it's like y'all thought he was bad. Wait till you get to Grosjean, okay? Like you haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, I just oh my god. I mean, I guess good on Grosjean for finding a ride. You and I had kind of theorized he would probably end up going back to Dale Coyne, and to be fair, a lot of people thought he would probably end up back at Dale Coyne. And that was not well, clearly that was not what happened, but I just, you know, you talk about a time bomb of an environment. Like I said, I cannot imagine this going ending any way other than poorly, honestly.
I
You
mean,
know, I
it's possible that he does well at Juncos just because Juncos is a smaller team than Andretti is, and he seems to do well with teams that have smaller environments and it's less pressure. However, to be honest, Juncos to me seems a little bit dysfunctional because I mean, even the way they handle this whole situation, in my opinion, they handled it very poorly because what we didn't mention was that they parted ways with Callum pretty late. Like this was a pretty late decision when this happened. And it was so late to the point where most of the seats, open seats in IndyCar were already filled. So it lessened his chance of even being able to find anything. And it's crazy because it was speculated probably like it seemed like this has been going on for a while. Like they knew that they were going to possibly let him go, like probably months before the announcement even became official. And this just happened like a few weeks ago. And it's like, man, I mean, where's he gonna go? Because there really aren't too many options left.
yeah, exactly. I was, and especially with the updates to silly season, Pietro Fittipaldi is going to be in the number 30, and Christian Rasmussen is in the number 20 Ed Carpenter racing car. The only thing I can think of where is Alec going? I think there's a spot at Dale Coyne if I've got my silly season shuffle correct. I
I
think
think it
there's
might be like, I don't know, Dale Coyne might have two spots. I don't know if Takuma Sato is coming back or if he just will do ovals again or something and it'll be somebody else doing like the road courses and stuff. Yeah, the other seat, Stingray Rob, I know his contract was up after 2023. Don't know
That's what I
what's
forgot
happening
about.
there, truthfully. There was, I guess, some speculation that he was going to go to Andretti, and I guess Andretti would have a four-car entry for next season. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Um, Rasmussen also is part-time, so he's
Hmm.
only doing, I think, road courses and street courses, and I think also the 500. So I guess it's still up in the air who's going to be also, I guess, sharing that with him. I don't know what's going on with Renus VK either. I think, I don't know. I don't know if he signed an extension or not. So I would assume he would. Um, Not too sure though. Honestly, I thought Hilot would have gone to like Ganassi. Like that was my hope. My hope was that he would have left Juncos and gone to Ganassi just because I felt like that environment probably would have been a little bit better and it probably also would have like kind of matched his speed, like his performance level, because he's a pretty good driver. And I'm like, it would be nice to see him just even have like a seat at this point. So it's kind of just like, all we can get. Because I'm like, yeah, going to Dale Coyne, it's like, yeah, it would be good that he has a seat. But at the same time, it's like, that's a smaller team. And I'm like, I don't think Dale Coyne would necessarily like have the like it wouldn't really let him grow that much.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I want to see Callum in a seat. I think he has gotten shafted so hard in all of this, to be perfectly honest. This he did not deserve any of this, and he has suffered quite significantly at the hands of Juncos, Ricardo Juncos particularly. Um, so I don't know. Yeah, there were a couple of things, silly season things, or seats and options, that hadn't been formally finalized that I had just forgotten about because IndyCar silly season has been very silly this year. Lots of moving parts and pieces. I need to make a spreadsheet next year if this is any indication. But but yeah, we'll have to see what happens. I want him to get a full-time ride. I think he deserves a full-time ride and certainly one in, a vaguely competitive team at least. We'll have to see because a lot of the big fish seats have been filled, unfortunately, because this is, as you noted, this is very late in the season to be announcing that somebody is moving on, because I think that was it was the very end of October, very beginning of November that was announced. And it's like, okay, we're like, where on earth is he going? This late in the season. It's kind of like when, Eric, at Martinsville, Eric Amarola announced that he was retiring. I was like, okay, well, dog, there are 2 races left. Why are you announcing this now? And that's exactly what this is. It's like, okay, why are you guys announcing that you're mutually splitting now with, basically no time for Callum to find a seat?
I mean,
So,
to be honest, they should have announced their breakup slash split probably like a few days after Laguna Seca happened, in my opinion. That's probably when it should have happened, if not earlier. Because I mean, this whole like debacle with Juncos has been going on for like a good chunk of the season. So it's not like this couldn't have come earlier. It really could have.
no, I completely agree. There was no reason why it needed to leave it this late. I don't know if that's a power move by JHR. I don't know if, maybe Callum was really working to try to at least keep the relationship stable enough that he could, basically run the season and then work throughout the season to find a new seat. Or it could very well be some combination thereof. I don't know. I don't think we're ever gonna know, truly what the 411 was
I mean,
with
I'm just glad he's gone from that team. It's like you
yeah.
have your teammate and the team leader, the team principal, whatever Ricardo Ginkos is called, like fucking sneak dissing you and liking shady tweets. And then you had Junkos hiding replies on Twitter that were
Yeah.
basically dragging them for their decision to sign Grosjean.
Which is not unfounded. Like I said, I certainly have, certainly just from a professional capacity, I have my concerns about Grosjean and Canapino sharing the same team. I think that's kind of an issue. But yeah, no, but the way that this has all been handled, I think has been absolutely appalling. And they really need to just Like I said, there were so many ways that this could have been done differently and better. Um, I think that this will become, a case study, for future IndyCar teams on exactly how not to handle this kind of thing. Truth be told, the only thing that really surprises me about all of this is that Callum didn't lodge some sort of legal proceedings. Seems to be the season for it, so I think might as well.
I think there's also some other speculation that RLL would expand to a four-car entry or something for the 2024 season, and I'm like, you know what? Even though they were promising towards the end of the season, this team does not need four cars. Like
Absolutely not.
they're gonna expand to four cars just to have half the team miss the Indy 500 and be watching it from the fucking couch. It's like their performance everywhere else, specifically ovals, was horrendous. It was so bad. And it's like, yeah, we're gonna expand to four cars. It's like, do y'all really need that?
No, that's the simple answer to that question is absolutely not. Yeah, like I said, the pickup in pace throughout particularly the latter half of the season was absolutely promising. But it's like to expand to four cars is just going to set them back to where they were at the beginning of this year, where they were, and truth be told, they've kind of been lost at sea for the last couple of years, where you're going to have, one maybe one car that does reasonably well. Great example. We recorded on the NASCAR pod last night, so I've got it floating around in my head. Great example. Kevin Harvick at Stewart Haas. Stewart Haas is absolute trash. Stewart Haas is just garbage in the Cup Series, particularly. Now they're pretty good in Xfinity. Cole Custer won the championship, but in Cup, Stewart Haas is just putrid, except for Kevin Harvick. Kevin has carried that team on his back really for the last about 4 years, when they really started to first experience their downturn in form. And we saw that with Taku. He was fast. He was consistently quick. Ray Hall is, of course, is the useless Nepo baby that he is. Couldn't get anything decent accomplished. In truth be told, even some of the other teammates really weren't that good, but you could count on Sato to be quick at that team. And I feel like we would basically just have that all over again. You would have one car, maybe two, that are vaguely competitive, race in, race out, but then everybody else is, 30th. And it's like, why?
It
Why
would
do that
if
to
they
yourself?
did it, it would be it would likely be only one guard, and if they the likely decision would be that they would sign Jury Vips, Slurry Vips. That's who they would have signed because he does have some speed. And then it's like that's exactly what would happen. It would probably be those two who are carrying the team the whole season, while whoever else they have, Ray Hall and Pietro, I'm like that kind of puzzles me that they signed him because I'm like, I mean, I don't really know that much about him, but I was kind of shocked that they didn't sign Vips to the 30 because I thought after Laguna Seca, since they put him in the 30 car, that's what was gonna happen, but I guess not.
Yeah, no, I thought that was basically them doing seat fitting all but putting him in the 30 for Laguna Seca, and the fact that he was able to keep that team, Ray Hall, they would get the lead. They got the leader circle prize money for that too. He got in the car and he drove fairly well. There's been lots of ink spilled about frankly, just the character concerns of Phipps. But given that, and apparently, nobody seems to give a shit in IndyCar, mean, whatever. I guess that's kind of a moot point. But yeah, I don't know what the game plan is with putting Pietro in the number 30.
To be honest, I
Maybe.
don't even know what this team is doing at all, actually. At
Well,
least on the
yeah,
IndyCar side. I'm kind of just not sure what's going on here. Like again, this is very confusing that they signed Pietro. That kind of was a curveball that threw me way off. And then it's likely, I mean, Graham Rahal said he hasn't done anything yet, but it's like we all fucking know that he's getting back in that 15 car. It's like his dad partially owns the freaking team for fuck's sake. So there's no way he's not getting that seat. might as well just take him and just glue his ass to the fucking seat because he is not leaving anytime soon. He'll be freaking 50 years old, still out there crashing out and getting DNFs of in every other IndyCar race at age 50.
Yeah, now granted, I might be coming back to this, in 6 months and, basically going to Ray Hall, I apologize. I was unfamiliar with your game, but I don't think that's the case. I yeah, I don't know what they're doing. It doesn't really make any sense to me at all. And yeah, you might as well just finalize the deal. I mean, truth be told, really great. Graham really needs to just go home and be a family man, if I'm being perfectly honest. But
Needs
it
to
doesn't.
just go home, be a stay-at-home dad at this point.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, but I just, yeah, like I said, just announce him. Like I said, he's not going anywhere. I, yeah, I can't imagine that he would. So, I don't know. Maybe one of these days, Bobby will get sick of his garbage and we'll tell him to go get a real job. But I don't know. Like I said, it doesn't seem likely because
He
Graham
needs
has
to
been,
just either go home, be a stay-at-home dad, or go get a CDL or something.
yeah, he's gonna be the one delivering my DoorDash. But yeah, I just like I said, I don't know. We'll see what happens there. Um, I'm certainly not really expecting a whole lot to start the season, and I, Pietro certainly, is talented, and I really think it's more about money. The Fittipaldi family as well, they're loaded, so I suspect that's probably why they signed him more than anything, is just because of the backing that he brings to the team.
Because I think that was another thing with the Juncos and Grosjean signing was that I guess there were also like financial issues or something that they were citing is also one of the reasons why they parted ways with Callum, which I'm like, okay, I don't know why you would pick up Grosjean because I don't know if Grosjean has sponsors that are coming with him because he was mainly sponsored by DHL when he was at Andretti, and DHL is not with Andretti. They left Andretti and went to Ganassi, I think. So it's like I don't know who he would have as financial backing, and it's like I if I'm concerned about finances, I'm not going to Grosjean of all people to it's like yeah, somebody who's like one of the biggest terrorists in IndyCar is gonna help me, with finances on my team when I have to worry about junk race cars maybe every other race. Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, I agreed, and I don't know. I mean, Grosjean was in Formula One for a very long time. Suffice it to say that those boys are well paid. So, maybe it's Grosjean is actually the one signing the checks. Um, I don't know that that's the case. That's usually not how that works, but maybe it is. But yeah, I don't know, who would be bringing money for Grosjean at this point. Because yeah, because like you said, all of his backing certainly in IndyCar was tied to DHL, and they noped off to Ganassi. So I I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But I am expecting fireworks, and I will be disappointed if there's anything other than.
Grosjean and Canapino coming together on track and starting World War III on Motorsports Twitter, I will be there no matter what.
Yeah, same. But alrighty, so now to get into our well, actually, before we pivot off, because there was some I want to don't want to say clarification because I'm not really sure that it clarifies, but there was some additional dialogue on the IndyCar super license nonsense.
Yeah, because I think it was somebody who like they basically their whole Twitter account is just basically like talking about like FIA super license stuff. And I guess like they were speculating that it's possible that IndyCar wasn't earning super license points for like 2 years. Some of this was mainly due to COVID and some tracks not being FAA homologated, which basically just means FAA approved. And some of the tracks didn't, I guess, renew their homologation, which some of that is probably because of COVID. Um, the tracks being Toronto, Detroit, Road America, not homologated as of April 2023 because April 2023 is like the most up to date list of FAA homologated tracks. The FAA doesn't really do a good job of updating that list very frequently. So, for all I know, it could have been changed since then because April was a few months ago. Um, to be honest, I have no idea. I honestly hate the whole super license point system anyways. Like I get rewarding people for driving in certain series. It's like, yeah, sure, but I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things where in theory it's a good idea and if we lived in a perfect world it would be a good idea, but because we don't, it's just not great.
Yeah, exactly. And the super license system, which actually hasn't been around for that long, it's informally called the Max Verstappen rule. Rumor mill has it that they were so disgusted at how early Max was pushed into F1, so much so that he actually skipped F2, if I remember correctly. And they were like, okay, absolutely not. We cannot have this happen again. Especially, I mean, you remember those first couple of years of Crash Stappen where he basically hit everything that moved and some things that didn't. And the FIA was like, we cannot do this again. So, yes, in a perfect world, if everything behaved and worked the way it was supposed to, this would be great. I find it very odd that this is all being brought up now, and then if this is a thing that stems back to COVID, which would be directly contrary to what the FIA said, because of COVID and just the lack of racing, they had paused. They had basically allowed super licenses and the points to carry over for a couple years. I don't think they officially got super license points going again until, was it 2021? It was either 21 or 22. I don't remember, but the whole point being is that yeah, just because of COVID restrictions, some countries didn't have racing resume until fairly recently. Um, and they didn't want folks to get shafted by it. So to then, like I
Knowing
said,
that, you would have thought that they would have given an exception to, I guess, Colton Herta, and they would have given him a super license because I think that was one of the main issues. But
hmm
they were like, no, we're not doing that.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's just the FIA contradicts itself so much. Yeah, it's part of just the absurd level of chains of command that exist within that structure. You'll have one person say one thing, and then you'll have somebody else say something completely different, and then you'll somehow find two more people that manage to say something completely different. It's ridiculous. Because, yeah, like I said, as far as I understand, this is directly contrary to sort of what had been the agreed upon structure, to deal with super license points and COVID restrictions. So I don't know. It only gets more and more muddled as we learn more and more. So, and of course, the FIA is not going to issue a statement. Mohammed Ben Sulayem is too busy playing 4D chess with F1 and its team principles right now. So, but
I swear, the FIA is just like a whole mess.
yeah, it really is. I don't. I read the stuff because I find it vaguely interesting, but it is so frustrating to try to keep up with, like, seriously at all. It's super irritating. Um, and I guess speaking of IndyCar stuff, all of the chatter about Thermal Club and the ticket prices.
Yeah, the main thing I saw was people complaining about, like, I guess, like a general admission ticket would be $2,000. And I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of money, but the purse prize money is $1 million. So I'm like, where exactly did you think they were going to get that $1 million from? Like you thought they were just gonna it was just gonna fall off a fucking tree outside or something? Like, no, the money has to come from somewhere.
They were gonna go beg Daddy NTT to go write that check, and NTT said no. But I mean, it's a fair bit of money, absolutely. But yeah, when you have such a high purse price, like I said, it's got to come from somewhere. It's still, nowhere near as egregious as, the fact that, the F1 weekend, they were for at Las Vegas, the fact that for a period they were charging, tens of thousands of dollars, for general, not just general admission, but hospitality. So, and the fact that Miami this year was like 5 or 6 grand, I say it. I've said it once. I've said it 1,000 times. Certainly, if you want to have fun at racing and get the whole experience, I do genuinely think NASCAR is a good way to do that. Go to Martinsville. Go to Daytona. Go to Michigan. Those are usually good races. Lots of good, fairly modern facilities, and it doesn't cost that much. And ditto, even watching sports car racing, even like Sebring and Daytona, all things considered, really aren't that
Yeah,
expensive.
IMSA and like even Watkins Glen is pretty good. Like I know at least Sebring and Watkins Glen, like you can like the paddock entries, like it's free, like you can just
Hmm.
walk in there. I'm like, I think those are good experiences, honestly.
Yeah, I certainly understand the draw to, IndyCar, which is, certainly the top flight of, American motorsports currently. And, F1, which is tried to position itself, granted rather tenuously, but as sort of, pinnacle of, European motorsports and, just pinnacle of motorsports generally. I understand the draw, but, I think occasionally for the products that you get, in the case of Formula One, it's a procession and you're not going to get much on track action. And then everything is just crazy expensive, from tickets to, trying to book hotels to, remember that menu that leaked out of Miami where we're like a
Somebody
basic
was saying
ass.
like $20 for like a pathetic looking like gyro or something. I don't know what it was. I think it was like some type of sandwich or something, but it was so funny. They're like, I paid $20 for this. So it's like, well, shit, if you can afford to pay $20 for that, then maybe you deserve to get scammed.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I understand the draw, but those just they aren't worth it in some instances anyway. Of course, if you can, somehow manage to go to Indy, absolutely do it. It's insane being at Indy during the 500 race day. But certainly if you want to get motorsports kicks, I really do. Um, for folks listening, on our side of the pond, definitely it's NASCAR and it's sports car racing. And if you live overseas, touring cars. Touring cars still, particularly the modern TCR series, great racing. They're at Snetterton and Oulton Park, which has got some of the best racing you'll find anywhere at any point.
Yeah, you
And
have that, and you have like GT World Europe, GT World Challenge, and DTM, and all that.
hmm but yes, but moving on. So we started talking about this a little bit earlier. The will they, won't they of Audi and its ostensible acquisition of the Sauber Formula One team. I am surprised to hear that, like I said, that the Volkswagen board is getting cold feet. This is not typical for them. Generally, they're pretty good, especially if they commit to a motorsport series, they're going to do it. So much so that they scrapped returning to sports cars, endurance racing for this, because that was the original plan.
Scrapped endurance racing, all their factory drivers got dispersed. So,
Hmm.
I mean, if it turns out they're withdrawing, it's like that would be disastrous. But I'm like, I don't know. I kind of want to see the drama.
Yeah, I say it would be so much egg on the face of F1 because, effectively welcoming Audi with open arms. And so much to the point that they were recording both Audi and Porsche was looking to hook up with Red Bull for a minute. But then the fact that, the Andretti saga has been long and winding and frankly kind of annoying. But then just for Audi to, at the 11th hour dip, which, like I said, that's wild because the rumor mill has it that they had built facilities to manufacture the engine and that they were doing engine testing already. So they have already dumped, if this is true, of course, they have already dumped huge amounts of money into infrastructure. And, and granted, like I said, generally speaking, the Volkswagen Group does not fall foul of sunk cost fallacy. So even if they've spent the money, if they no longer feel like it's worth it, they will drop it. We've seen it happen before. But it's still wild to think that they have gone through most of the effort to get in F1 to just go, nah. I mean, they have, like I said, the road car divisions. I'm doing a quick head count. There are like 8 divisions, different road car divisions within the Volkswagen Group. Um, so in theory, they could repurpose that, for, as like a flagship production facility or as an R&D facility going forward, but why? Just why?
It, it's a whole mess. I mean, the fallout would be immense, but it is what it is. We'll see.
Yeah,
Yes, so we're talking about Formula E because they have started testing. They started testing at least a few weeks ago. I
yeah.
guess like a fire broke out at the testing facility or something, and they had to cancel testing for like the first day. It was very weird.
Which is funny because this isn't the first time that there's been a fire in the pits at Valencia. Valencia 2012, Bruno Senna's Williams set itself on fire after Pastor Maldonado won the race. So it's like this is the second time in a little more than a decade that the pit area has been set on fire due to a car, and I think that's hilarious. But I'd be
I didn't
interested
even
in.
think it was due to a car. I think it was like the facility where they have like batteries and stuff or something. It caught on fire.
That makes sense. I was just about to say it was just a thermal runaway because, of course, Formula E, they use lithium ion batteries. If you push those batteries too hard, you can get a thermal runaway event where the cells are unable to cool themselves down. Because especially when they're not hooked up to the cars, I mean, they're just passive cooled. There is an oil cooling system otherwise, but when they're out of the car, they don't do that. And then, yeah, that's how you get a you get a battery fire. And battery fire is spooky. Battery fires are very spooky. So, yeah, I remember hearing about it. I didn't see much in the way of like real explanations from Formula E or Valencia or even I'm assuming the local fire authority on exactly what went on there.
No, it was
So,
very cryptic. It kind of just happened, and everybody was like, "Oh, well, that happened," and then just moved on and continued testing the next day like nothing happened.
yeah, which is just wild. I mean, granted, this was always going to be, a possibility with Formula E. Battery fires are going to be a thing potentially. So I guess everybody was just kind of like shrug emoji. But like I said, still just a little surprising. I would have liked to know a little bit more about what exactly caused that. But
So apparently they have a new circuit, I guess, next season, the Tokyo E-Prix, which I'm like, looking at that track map, I don't know how well that's gonna go.
I mean, it would be very formula. It's a very Formula E circuit for better and worse.
For
Um,
sure.
I don't know how well that's gonna race, but I suspect what'll happen is they'll get cars out for practice and quality. They'll find out if the track race is like garbage, then they'll make basically emergency tweaks overnight because they do that sometimes. And then they set up as the course, just like I said, to try to get it to race better. I'm super hyped for Tokyo to have a Formula E circuit. I think that is so cool.
I'm expecting it to go similar to how the inaugural Nashville GP for IndyCar went. That's how
Oh,
I'm
good
expecting it
God.
to go.
Yeah, that's probably right. But yeah, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. But like I said, I'm certainly hyped, and given that that would effectively be the home race for the Nismo team, I'd expect them to maybe bring some heat for the livery because that basically testing livery cherry blossom thing that they've been parading around social
I love
media
that.
is
It's so
is
great.
so pretty. Yeah. So I'm telling you, Nismo, if anybody from the Nissan Formula E team is listening, I'm expecting heat for your livery at Tokyo. But speaking of heat, we have Nick. He's back. He's with Mahindra.
He literally went full circle. Like, it's just very weird how that happened.
It is. I mean, there has been so much ink spilled. He got dealt such a terrible hand in Formula One with the way that, he was basically picked up on the spot by Helmut Marko. And this is no slander towards Nick. Let me be very, very clear. But Nick has his strengths and his weaknesses. He was in the Mercedes driver system for a long time. There was a reason why they never called him up to F1 after he won the F2 championship. It's like you got to think that there was a reason for that. And don't get me wrong, because he stood in for Albon at Monza in 2021 or 22. I don't remember when that was. But point being is he stood in for Albon. And I mean, he did pretty well. But Albon is a circuit that not only played well to the strengths of the Williams, aka being exceptionally fast in a straight line and basically nowhere else, but also to Nick's strengths as a driver. It's like, don't get me wrong, it was a great stand in, but that should not have been, if we are to be believed, that should not have been the primary driver behind hiring Nick at AlphaTauri in the first place, because he was always going to sink. So, like I said, he got dealt such a bad hand. I'm happy to see him land back on his feet in Formula E. I feel like he's deserved it after the, 8 weeks, 10 weeks of just absolute shit that he went through in within Red Bull's driver system at Formula One. But hopefully this is kind of a learning lesson for all involved.
Yeah, he's back at Mahindra with the new teammate, Motara. Um, there's only like one rookie in FE this season. It's mainly everybody else has just been switching around, just switching teams. It's Jahan. He was from F2. I'm pretty sure, like, because he had done rookie testing, and I think his Formula 2 contract with whatever team he was with was up after the season ended. So it was kind of a given that that was going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Daravala is kind of a. I feel like that's kind of F2's or kind of bruh moment, because like he's been in F2 for a while and not really done anything particularly useful, noteworthy in F2. So I feel like it was only a matter of time before he got the boot, frankly. So we'll see what happens. I feel like if he's gonna be anywhere, having being in Formula E is probably the best place for him to exist.
I mean,
But
yeah, Formula E is like one of the most unserious racing series that exists. Like, and everybody's like friends too. It's just one big happy family.
yeah, exactly. So no, I think it's a good place for him to end up. Now, if only freaking Drugovich would get the hint that Aston Martin is not hiring him at like any point ever. And then, maybe he goes to find something else to do, because he re-upped his reserve driver contract here recently. And I was just like, why? So long as Lance Stroll exists on that team, you are not getting a drive. Like, you're just
Yeah,
not.
it's so funny because apparently he was like, I guess, liking like shady posts towards Lance, and I'm like, buddy, I'm sorry, but that's not gonna help you get that seat any faster.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like I said, are those a lot of those tweets wrong? No, absolutely not. But it is your fault for re-upping with Aston Martin in the first place. It's like, since apparently you're that self-aware, they're like, well, why in the hell did you do it? It's like, cut your losses and go find something else to do. Go to IndyCar, go to Formula E, go do something besides
I
sitting
mean,
around doing simulator work.
he did rookie testing for Formula E, and then, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think he's done anything with IndyCar. I think he was supposed to test with ECR, but he turned that down. So,
Yeah, which is just bonkers to me. And like I said, I know he's putting his eggs all in Formula One, but I mean, like I said,
I mean, at
in
some
this,
point, you kind of have to be realistic. Like,
yeah, exactly. You have to understand that it's just not going to happen, and I just don't think it is. I don't think, certainly not with Aston Martin, and he's getting to the point where he's getting old enough that I'm not sure it's going to happen with too many other teams at this rate. So yeah,
I don't honestly, I don't know what his plan is.
I don't either. Well, I don't. His immediate term plans are to sit here and do all of the grunt work for Aston Martin. That's what the immediate term plans are. But certainly long term aspirations, no, I don't think anybody knows other than Drugovich. And even then, I'm not convinced that he knows either.
I mean,
So
to me, it feels like delusion. It's just like, yeah, if I think hard enough and pigeonhole myself to F1, then eventually it will happen. It's like, no, baby, I don't think that's gonna happen.
yeah, no, I agree. I don't see anything happening. Certainly not on the Formula One front. But he seems to know something that we all don't. So maybe I should
I mean, if that's
maybe.
the case, I'll eat my own words.
Yeah,
Till
exactly.
then, I stand by what I say.
Indeed. So, yeah, I guess we'll see what happens going forward, but I certainly don't expect much from him. But no, happy to see Daravala in Formula E. I think this is a good place for him to end up. I don't think he was ever really Formula One material, which is not a bad thing, not by any stretch of the imagination. Most drivers aren't. But to see him, basically in, Formula Two for a long time. I swear that man was in Formula Two for like 6 years or something. I'll have to go back and look.
I mean, that's
Um,
kind of crazy.
yeah, let me go back and look before I rubber stamp that. But it feels like it has been a while that he's been
I
in
mean, being in a
F2.
ladder series for 6 years is like, damn.
Yeah, so he started karting in 2011, and then yeah, he started his junior Formula career in 2015. He started with the Formula Renault, and then let me see. Yeah, and he's bounced between. I'm sorry, I was actually thinking of Formula Three. Yeah, because he has been bounced in and out of like Formula Three and Formula Two since 2017. Because 1 year he's in Formula Three, the next he's in Formula Two, then he was in GP3 for a year and running lots of little partial schedules here and there. But yeah, he's bounced between F3 and F2 since like 2017. That's absolutely ridiculous. But oh well. But like I said, happy to see him in Formula E. I think this will be good for him, and I think this will open more doors for him for other series and hanging around in F3 and F2 for eternity. So we'll see what happens there. But that will conclude the open wheel special. I don't know. Maybe that'll be the title of this episode of Chicanery. Got anything else for us before we sign this episode off?
I don't think so.
Yes. Well, next on the list will be sports cars. There was a lot that has happened since the last time we recorded, so unfortunately, we could not get to everything in one. So think of that as kind of a part two. Um, and also, just for those of you who are interested, I made the call in the Victory Lane Vibes episode, but I will do it here. I am moving closer towards being ready for prototype bags of the VLV blend. So if you are interested, then DM me at a Spectre of sorts. Spectre being spelt like the Bond movie um, on Twitter, and or you can do it on Instagram as well, or you can message us at eastside.roasters, roasters with a Z, and on Instagram. And if you are interested, we will send you one out before we start shipping the production bags of the Victory Lane Vibes blend, hopefully in about a month or so. So, of course, with that, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you in the next one. Goodbye.
Peace.